It's the amazing Rico Brogna podcast with your host, Evan Roberts.
How we feeling? We ready to go? We pumped up? Welcome to Rico Brogna, the off day into Game 3 of the National League Championship Series edition of Rico Brogna. The Mets, of course, coming off that huge victory on Monday afternoon to even this bad boy up and take it back to Citi Field, where hopefully the Mets can take command of this best-of-7 series against the LA Dodgers. We'll take a look at Game 3. I certainly have some thoughts on the lineup. Carlos Mendoza's dropped some hints already. The rotation set up the rest of the series. And we are going to try to read as many emails as humanly possible. The email has been just completely overblown over the last couple of days. So there's tons of them. I haven't even been able to read half of them, some of which we may read right here on the Rico for the very first time. But there's a couple of things going back to Game 2 that I want to kind of finish up talking about. Number one, you got to give Pete Alonso immense credit, because when the LA Dodgers were putting the rallies together and scaring the ever-loving crap out of us with the rally in the 6th inning, with putting a guy on base in the 7th inning, with putting together a 2-out rally in the 8th inning, that 3-run lead the Mets were holding on to felt very delicate. And it felt as if it could disappear mighty quickly. So as I was watching that 9th inning with a group of Met fans, we were praying to the baseball gods that the Met bats, which had been so quiet since the first 2 innings of this game, would wake up and supply insurance. And in that 9th inning, with a 3-run lead, Pete Alonso, and he's done this a lot throughout the postseason, he'll get a lot of attention for the home run in Milwaukee, the home run against the Philadelphia Phillies. Certainly, you can understand why that gets a lot of attention. But Pete's had some very good at-bats during this postseason. Even before he started getting hot, that was one of the defenses I had of Pete. And he put together a great at-bat in that 9th inning with 1 out, where he drew a walk and then stunned all of us by stealing second base, in which the pitcher at the time, Henriquez, didn't even look back at him. And Pete, not exactly fleet of foot, took advantage of the situation and stole second base and set them up for a monstrous insurance run. So kudos to Pete for that in the 9th inning. It sort of gets forgotten about because Edwin Diaz was able to strike 3 guys out in a row after he put the first 2 guys on base. And so the insurance runs turned out to not necessarily matter in terms of the Dodgers coming back and scoring runs. But think about it. They have a 3-run lead. The Dodgers get the first 2 guys on base. When Mookie, Teoscar, and Freeman came up without an insurance run, those guys would be the tying runs at the plate. So as nerve-wracking as we all felt in that 9th inning anyway, it would have been a lot worse if Pete Alonso didn't steal second base. And then I have it followed up by Starling Marte, who has put together, I think, the best run of his entire Met career. A Met career that's been littered by many injuries, by ineffective play a year ago, by missing a bulk of time down the stretch 2 years before that in 2022. He gets 3 hits in Game 2 against the Dodgers. He's had so many clutch hits. We even saw Mendy make that move in the batting order where Marte is now batting 5th, and he deserves to, especially with the slumping Jose Iglesias. So I thought that 9th inning was a little underrated, and I want to give them a lot of props for that. It was a great victory, Game 2. Now, I know the Dodgers are throwing a bullpen game, so there's this expectation of you better hit them, you better score runs, you better win that game. And yeah, I mean, I think we all felt the pressure of taking Game 2, especially with Sean Manaea on the mound. But it's easier said than done. Look, the San Diego Padres are a damn good offense, and they had to deal with a Dodger bullpen game, and they couldn't figure it out in Game 4. And there's a very good chance, if this series is extended, and my gut tells me it will. Like, Mike, as much as I would love to see the Mets come back to Citi Field and win 3 straight games and we could have a party like we did in 2000, winning the National League pennant, this feels like a long series. This feels like a series that's certainly going back to Los Angeles and maybe even going the distance to a 7th game, which means the Dodgers are going to throw another bullpen game, which means, again, the pressure is going to be on for the Mets to get to the cavalcade of arms that the Dodgers can throw at you. But great victory in game 2. Enough can't be said for the clutchness of Francisco Lindor hitting that leadoff home run, and certainly Mark Vientos, who admitted after the game he took it personal when Lindor was intentionally walked ahead of him. Good. You love to see that attitude. Mark Vientos blossoming into a star right before our eyes. As far as Mendy's decision is concerned, he did make the decision that we all expected, which is Luis Severino is starting game 3 and Jose Quintana is starting game 4. Luis Severino has not been bad by any stretch. You know, you look at his last start, and it feels like his last start was 6 months ago, but he made that starting game 2 against the Philadelphia Phillies. And for the first 5 2/3 innings, the guy was utterly brilliant. The guy threw the baseball maybe as well as we've seen Luis Severino throw it this season. And then all of a sudden, he lost it quickly. So I think what we need to take from that is the lessons of Severino can lose it at any possible moment. That's the lesson. But as far as him getting the game 3 start over Jose Quintana, I think a part of why I lean towards Quintana getting the start over Sevy is more thinking about game 7. And thinking about that scenario, and I don't think it's even unlikely. I think it's a relatively likely scenario that we are sweating out a winner-take-all game 7 for the National League Championship. And I think the simple question that we'd have is, who would you want on the mound? Would you want Luis Severino? Or would you want Jose Quintana? And I think the simple answer to that, to me, is Jose Quintana. Only because Quintana's just been throwing the baseball better. He's just been better. He's been great. Severino has not made a start, though, at Citi Field. You got to go all the way back to that start he made against the Phillies. It was the Thursday night game, the same night the Jets played the Patriots. I guess I associate those two things together. Mets and Jets linked forever. And he was pretty good in that game. He pitched 6 solid innings. You know, really the typical Sevy out, which is 6 innings, 3 runs. The same start we saw in his last start against Philadelphia. 6 innings, 3 runs is basically the Luis Severino special. But if you look back at a lot more of his starts going back further, he's had a much better year throwing at Citi Field than he's been on the road. You go back one start before that against Cincinnati, he pitched into the 7th inning and only allowed 1 run. Start before that was against Boston, 7 innings, 1 run. Start before that in the middle of August was the complete game shutout he threw against the Miami Marlins, clearly the best game he threw this season. So Sevy's had very good success at home. Obviously, that doesn't matter between game 3 and 4. Both games are at home. But I guess it's just a reason to have some level of confidence in Sevy getting the baseball in game 3. But I think if this does go to a 7th game and Severino is starting the 7th game, Quintana is probably better equipped to come out of the bullpen in a winner-take-all game than Luis Severino. Quintana's done it before. Granted, it's been a long time, but he's capable of it. So I think that may be the one lean towards Quintana going in game 4 instead of game 3. Just that possibility that, look, both are going to be available. If the Mets are playing a winner-take-all game 7, the first guy out of the bullpen is going to be the guy who started game 4. It's only going to be on 3 days rest. If it was up to me, I would flip him. I would start Jose Quintana. But again, it's like one of those decisions that I don't hate it. I just slightly disagree with it. So Sevy's going to get the ball in game 3. Quintana's going to get the ball in game 4. The other big debate that we're all having is, what do you do in game 5? And I will tell you something that may surprise you. As somebody that didn't want to start Kodai Senga in game 1 of this series, the reason why I'm undetermined on it, but I lean towards Senga getting another start, is that I want David Peterson available out of the bullpen in games 3 and games 4. So for anyone, and I totally get it, but Ingo said it on the air with us today, hey, I'd rather David Peterson start. You know, we talked about this on a previous Rico. David Peterson earned making starts in the postseason. I don't think there's any question about that. But circumstances have changed. And if the Mets are in a tight game in game 3 and they need to get a big lefty out, let's say it is Shohei Ohtani with 2 on and 2 out, who do you want coming in to get him out? You want Ryan Stanek? You want Phil Maton? Those are the guys in the circle of trust. Or do you want David Peterson? And I think we'd all agree the answer is David Peterson. And I think it's possible if not likely, that with 2 days of rest, which he will now have had, not having pitched in game 2, obviously not having pitched on Tuesday during the off day, David Peterson should be available in game 3 and 4. So the reason why, if you ask me that question right now, hey, Evan, what do you do for game 5? Obviously, card subject to change. If David Peterson isn't used out of the bullpen in 3 or 4 for whatever reason, maybe the Mets are getting blown out or vice versa. Maybe the Mets are blowing the Dodgers out. And for whatever reason, they don't need David Peterson. Severino's brilliant. He pitches 8 scoreless innings or 7 scoreless innings. They go right to Edwin Diaz. For whatever reason, they never need to use David Peterson. Different discussion. And then I would totally lean towards what others are, which is just start Peterson over Senga. Don't get too cute. Don't play the opener game. That's fine. I don't think you're wrong, but my priority in game 3 and game 4 is for David Peterson to be a weapon out of that bullpen. That's where I would lean. The other thing the Mets have to figure out, because none of us have any idea, Kodai Senga is a creature of mechanics and knowing his body and knowing how he feels. He said after the game his mechanics were out of whack. Okay. Is that a physical thing? Is something off? Because one thing we've learned about Senga, if something's off, I don't want to mess around. I don't want him to pitch. Get his ass off the roster, replace him, and we'll move on. And we'll have to figure it out. So what they've got to know about Kodai Senga is how does he feel? Now, what I didn't like about him starting in game 1 was the fact that you're now asking him in game 5 to be on regular rest, which he very rarely does. So for a guy who's very careful about his mechanics and something little tiny being off can affect everything, like we saw in game 1 of this series, I don't feel great about the fact that he's being asked to do something he never did in Japan and rarely did in America. So it goes back to why I just didn't like the decision to begin with. But in a 1-1 series with huge games coming up at Citi Field, I am prioritizing finding a way to win game 3 and win game 4. And part of the way you may do it is with David Peterson on the mound. And that's why I'm certainly not going to sit here right now and declare that David Peterson should pitch game 5. Because if he's pitching game 5, he's not available in game 3 and game 4 to the bullpen. And then what's Kodai Senga? What a waste of time that'll be. If you're not starting Kodai Senga in game 5 and you don't feel comfortable pitching him out of the bullpen, it was already suggested by an emailer a few days ago, then Phantom IL the crap out of him, like the Guardians did with Alex Cobb. Not that that's a Phantom IL, but they took him off the roster. It is what it is. And look, you're not eligible for the World Series, but at least you're able to replace that guy on the roster. Pete Hoffman, how do you feel about all this? Are you in the camp of no matter what, I don't want Senga pitching game 5? Where are you feeling?
You know what? It's funny because I really want to buy into Senga come back and return with some sort of force. But the way he looked like he didn't want to be there in game 1, I'm kind of over him. I don't need it.
Well, I think that, first of all, I think he wants to be there. I think he just was a mess. He was just bad. I think the lesson that needs to be learned from all this is if you're going to start him in game 5, if he's going to make another start in this series, you got to be aggressive to get him out of the game. You can't be patient. And look, you see this around baseball that, in the postseason, I saw a great example of it in the Yankee Guardian game 2 with Stephen Vogt, where Stephen Vogt was very quick to take Tanner Bybee out of the game. Like, he didn't wait around. He didn't wait for things to get ugly. And I think with Senga, more so than some of the other starters that you have, when you see he's ineffective, get him out of the game. Stealing an extra 2 or 3 outs is not worth a messy Kodai Senga. So if you're going to start him, Mendoza needs to learn the lessons from game 1 and not give him too much rope.
Oh, but you just said too much rope. I wouldn't give him any rope. If he walks the first batter on 4 pitches, you're done. Like, well, I don't even.
There's a 3 batter minimum, so he's not done.
Well, in my opinion, he'd be done. It'd be get the bullpen ready. You're done as soon as possible. As soon as the minimum's over, you're gone.
Now, understand the ramifications of that is that David Peterson's not available out of the bullpen in game 3 and 4. You're okay with that?
It sucks, but I mean, it's kind of what we have to deal with.
Yeah, I mean, it lessens the bullpen. That's the negative that goes along with it.
But then at that point in time, you might as well start David Peterson. Game 5, like make it that the thing.
Yeah, but if you're not using him in game 3 and 4, I mean, you may need to use him out of the bullpen in game 3 and 4 unless you're declaring right now you wouldn't make him available in any way.
So okay, so here's the reality: we need to win games, right?
Yes.
So game 3 and game 4 kind of dictate how game 5 is going to go.
That's exactly what I'm saying. If you use Peterson in 3 or 4 to win a baseball game, he's not starting game 5, and then you have to live with the Kodai Senga, Tyler McGill, rest of the bullpen kind of night.
I hate it.
Listen, I hate it, but I also hate more not having a reliable arm to try to get Shohei Ohtani out with 2 on and 2 out in the 6th inning. So, it's kind of like the whole you're robbing Peter to pay Paul. I guess that's the phrase. If you are committing to Peterson in game 5, you're also hurting your bullpen in 3 and 4. So that's the trade-off. Speaking of which, Anthony writes, as we mix in some emails, the Mets really can't be considering Kodai Senga again in game 5, can they? It was worth the gamble the first time and maybe the second, but it hasn't worked either time. This is a guy that took a half a season to come back from injury because he had to feel just right. And how many rehab starts to get him there? Start Peterson followed by McGill and stop messing around. The Mets need to find a role for McGill, as I think he can be a weapon out of the pen. Pairing him with Peterson gives you many more innings and a lefty-righty combo. On another note, the resale market for tickets is crazy. Tickets are going for half of face value, completely screwing me since I don't think I can go tomorrow, but can't get rid of the tickets. I've never seen anything like it. I don't know what you paid for tickets. I haven't seen the tickets get cut in half. Like what I have noticed with the resale market is that it is cooled off over the last 48 hours, and the tickets are not nearly as hot as they were for the series against the Philadelphia Phillies. But, unless you paid some crazy amount for tickets, because I know the Mets and the Yankees, they all do it. They offer you different prices. So for season ticket holders, they give you one price. And then if you buy the tickets, like general sale tickets through the Mets, it's a different price and it's a lot more. So maybe you paid that second price and now you can't go and you're putting it on the resale market and the prices just aren't the same. But I have noticed that as hot as the Mets were in the series against Philadelphia, they're not quite as hot. And I think the fair follow-up is, well, why? They're playing the LA Dodgers. What is making it less hot? And I got to tell you, I think I have a theory on it. And I don't love it because I think you've got to go one series at a time and you can't look ahead. But I also respect if you have a certain allotment of money that you're going to spend on Met playoff tickets and you can't go over it, you're going to say to yourself, you know what? I don't want to buy Game 3 NLCS tickets. God forbid they're in the World Series. I'll save my money for that. And I think the specter of a potential Subway World Series is what is going to lower the prices in the National League Championship Series. That's my theory. I think people are waiting with the hope of, man, I got to be in the building for a World Series game, potentially between two rivals from the same city. But good luck selling your tickets, and hopefully you'll be able to make it out to one of these games. Speaking of going to these games, Danny writes, the Mets have released their first pitch lineup for this week's home games. I don't hate any of them, but I could definitely go without Yoenis Cespedes. That's right. Yoenis Cespedes is one of the guys. What they're doing is they're honoring three different eras in Met history. They're not going to the 60s because I guess they're just being mean to older people. or they don't want to track down a 75-year-old man to throw out the first pitch. So they're honoring the 80s by having Darryl Strawberry throw to Doc Gooden. Totally fine. Both guys had their number retired this year. Legendary Mets. Then they're having Robin Ventura throw to Edgardo Alfonzo, two beloved Mets from the late 90s, early 2000, the 2000 National League champion New York Mets. And then finally, and I think this is the one that's really intriguing because of who it is and how they haven't been around much, honoring the National League champions of 2015, it will be Matt Harvey to Yoenis Cespedes. I told my wife about this because we got married in 2015. So she went to a lot of games with me. She knows all the Mets from 2015. And I said, baby, ready to hear which 2015 Mets they're going to have honoring? And she's like, she wanted to guess. And her guess was Jacob deGrom to Curtis Granderson. I was like, Grandy's not a bad guess. And I said, hon, the problem with deGrom is that he's active. Like, I don't know if that's ever happened where you're going to get an active player on another team and say, hey, we want to honor you, throw out the first pitch. But it was a good guess by her. No deGrom, no Grandy, but it's Matt Harvey to Yoenis Cespedes. Do you like that, Pete?
Are they bringing the wild boar with Cespedes or no?
Not quite.
I listen, I think this is a good idea. And when we get to the World Series, they should bring out Max Scherzer and James McCann.
Oh, God.
No, listen, whatever. It is what it is. It's cool. I do think that they should honor some of that team. Or it's special. Cespedes, do I care about Cespedes enough? I'd almost prefer to see Dan Murphy because he was more in the playoffs than Cespedes was.
Yeah, Daniel Murphy threw out a first pitch in the division series, so that's probably why they don't want to be redundant. So they could have saved him, obviously, but I think at that point they didn't know. Yeah, so for the two NLDS games, it was Keith Hernandez and Daniel Murphy. They had individuals doing it. By the way, if the Mets get to the World Series and they play the New York Yankees, you cannot have anybody from the 2000 team do anything. I want to stay as far away from 2000 as I possibly can. It's okay now to honor Robin Ventura and Edgardo Alfonzo, two great Mets. But if they are hosting game 3, 4, and 5 of the World Series, I'm not doing it. I think that's a huge mistake. I stay as far away from the 2000s as humanly possible. That's my opinion. Right?
What if they brought back Piazza catching and Roger Clemens pitching?
I'm not even kidding you. No offense to Mike. I don't want him anywhere near the World Series. If you want Mike Piazza, you do him now. I don't want him because it's bad memories. I love Mike. I mean, Mike's a great Met. If they are playing the Yankees in the World Series, and let's be honest, if the Mets are getting to the World Series, that's who they're playing. I don't think there's any question in anybody's mind. I don't want Todd Zeile. I don't want Timo Perez. I don't want Al Leiter. I don't want Mike Hampton. I don't want Armando Benitez. I don't want Johnny Franco. No. That's my answer.
Yeah, we remember the last time that Mike Piazza was involved with a last pitch or at Shea Stadium, right? We lost game 162 in 08.
Well, I think he's done it since then, but yes, I do get your point.
But that's again, big spot, big moment. We don't need it. You're right.
Yeah, I would go if the Mets are in the World Series. If we are fortunate enough to see that, one guy is David Wright. Just put him out there. We got a little David Wright action. That's number one. Number two, you know what I would do? Actually, I would honor World Series MVPs. So I'd go like family members of Don Clendenin, Ray Knight, something like that. That's what I would do. But all I'm saying is I don't want anything to do with 2000. All right, get that crap out. I don't want anything to do with it. Now, let's get to some more of your emails. Jason Jackson writes, lineup disagreements. I'm watching SNY, and Anthony DeComo says J.D. Martinez will DH. Why? He's washed. Great career. Would love him as a coach next year, but he can't get it done anymore. Jesse Winker is playing really well. Has great numbers against Walker Buehler. Anthony says Jose Iglesias will continue to play over Jeff McNeil. Again, why? Give McNeil a game. Iglesias is over-indexed right now. Over-indexed. What does that mean? overexposed? I haven't heard of over-index, but I'll go with it. Mendoza's making this harder than it has to be. Can David Stearns just override him? All the other analytic GMs do. Why can't ours? It's the playoffs. No time to mess around. This isn't June. So let me start with the JD Martinez question. Carlos Mendoza is the one that said during his press conference during the off day, he didn't guarantee it, but he said he expects JD Martinez to be in the lineup in game 3. And I'm going to agree with Jason. I think that's a mistake. I know JD's a veteran, and there's that hope of, give him enough at-bats, eventually he'll get hot. I think the makeup of the Los Angeles Dodgers being a very right-handed pitching team, they only have one lefty, and that's in their bullpen, Anthony Banda. I don't think it makes any sense for JD Martinez to play. I think that's a huge mistake. So let's get that out of the way now. If Mendy is speaking truth here, that JD is going to DH game 3, does not make any sense. And he doesn't have great career numbers against Walker Buehler. He's 0 for 3 with 2 strikeouts. Not that that's, a penalization or anything, but it's not like he does have good career numbers. Jesse Winker, on the other hand, is 4 for 15 with 2 home runs. It makes no sense to start JD Martinez over Jesse Winker. By the way, we like to go through these numbers, these head-to-heads. Pete Alonso has great career numbers against Walker Buehler. 5 for 14 with 4 home runs. How about that? 4 home runs and 8 RBIs in just 14 at-bats against Walker Buehler. As far as McNeil's concerned, so I think you've got 2 choices in terms of getting Jeff McNeil in the lineup, okay? You mentioned Jose Iglesias. Jose Iglesias has cooled off. I'm with you on that. He went 1 for 5 in his last game. Also made a defensive miscue that almost stuck it to us. But he is a better defensive second baseman than Jeff McNeil. I think that's obvious. It's tough. It's very tough to kind of toe that line between Iglesias has cooled off, just sit him for Jeff McNeil, who, by the way, hasn't had consistent at-bats in a month, versus, hey, Iglesias is one of the reasons we're here. He's gotten so many clutch hits. Ride him out. What are we really talking about? We're talking about a handful of games in which he hasn't hit. So I still lean towards Jose Iglesias, but I would take it on a case-by-case basis. Like, I would start him in game 3. I'm not ready to pull the trigger on benching him for McNeil, but if he looks awful in his first 3 at-bats, 2 on, 2 out, 8th inning, am I considering a pinch hit opportunity with Jeff McNeil? I am. That's option number 1. Sit Iglesias, play Jeff McNeil. Personally, I'm not there yet. Option number 2 is DH Brandon Nimmo. Brandon Nimmo is dealing with this plantar fasciitis. You can see it bothers him. Now, luckily, Brandon Nimmo is still out there drawing walks, still out there hopefully producing. He didn't produce in game 2. He actually didn't even produce in game 1 either. I think so far in this series, let me confirm this, he is 0 for 4, 0 for 7 so far in this league championship series. So who knows? Maybe the plantar fasciitis is affecting him offensively. Would I sit him? No, not quite yet. I think it's the same thing as Iglesias. I would need to see another 0 for. By the way, I'm going back to game 4. He was 0 for 3 there too. So now we're at 0 for 10. Before that, 0 for 12 with a bunch of walks mixed in. So let me find Brandon Nimmo's last hit. There it is. The last time he's had a hit, he's 0 for his last 11 with a few walks mixed in, is the home run he hit in the 7th inning of game 2 of the division series against the Phillies. With that said, I'm not sitting him. I'm not ready to sit him. I card subject to change, as I always say, because my opinion may differ if he has an 0 for 5. Same with Iglesias if he continues to struggle. But I think Brandon Nimmo is one of the guys, again, that got you here. I'm not sitting him. Would I consider DHing him, though, because of the plantar fasciitis, to get him off his feet, not have him run around in the outfield and play Jeff McNeil in left field? I don't think that's crazy. Now, that means you're sitting Jesse Winker. You could also, by the way, just play Winker in left field. Jesse Winker is not bad enough where you can't just flip him to get Brandon Nimmo off his feet. But I think a lot of that is talking to Brandon, seeing how he feels, and seeing if he thinks that can help him. Let's go to David Aaron. David Aaron sent us a picture of him with his kids in Los Angeles at the game. He had a very good time. He wanted to share his experience. He's a transplanted New Yorker who moved out to San Diego 6 years ago. I was planning on taking my boys to Petco Park should the Padres have won. I was tracking prices for tickets, and they were astronomical. When the Dodgers won, I figured it wouldn't hurt to check out ticket prices. Maybe because it was a day game, but tickets were very affordable. The cheapest price to get in was as low as $95. I bought seats behind home plate, fourth row in the reserved section for $180, only to see similar seats drop to $130 the morning of game. How about that? I think the Dodger fan also has an arrogance. They're saving their shekels for a potential World Series. The drive up from San Diego wasn't terrible, 2 hours and 15 minutes, and the drive home was 2:35. Not bad. The fans were all nice, and I'd say it was 10 to 15% Met fans. I'm surprised about a few things. I'm surprised that they were all nice, because my experience in LA with Beningo and Giannotti back in the day was not good. They'll be the first to tell you. Dodger fans are real animals. So good for you. And 10 to 15% isn't bad. You know, you can hear the Met fans making noise when good things happen. Tons of empty seats. It seemed like only 85% capacity. It confirmed my perception that LA really does have the worst fans. How can you not sell out an NLCS game? And to think how much more empty it would have been had it been a team like the Pirates instead of the Mets. Also, although I bought the tickets on the secondary market, it was clear it came from the Dodgers. So I feel they just went straight to the secondary market. I think a lot of teams do that. I don't even know if it's legal, but I've always had that belief that teams will just put their own tickets on the secondary market. He goes on to say it was an amazing experience, and as a father with two boys yourself, I know you'd agree that 30 years from now, they'll remember this game more than one random day of school that they had to miss. Yeah, no doubt. You have an opportunity to take your kids to a postseason game, especially on the road, especially at a historic venue like Dodger Stadium. You got to do it. I'm glad you had a good time. I'm glad you saw a win. Ian writes, how thrilled is Fred Wilpon that Citi Field is hosting the Dodgers playoff games again? Does he sit behind the visiting dugout with Sandy Koufax? This is the kind of email that 5 years ago I'd be bothered by. But in 2024, you can only laugh. Brad writes, love the pod. I definitely had Ruben Tejada, Chase Utley flashbacks on that double play when it was reviewed. If the Mets are down 3-1 entering Game 5, I think they have to go David Peterson. But 2-2 or by some miracle up 3-1, then I would go with Senga. Thoughts? Again, these thoughts on Senga in Game 5 have a lot to do with, do I need to use David Peterson in Game 3 and 4? All right, this one, Mike has an issue with Hoffman. All right. It's about the podcast. So I guess I'll read it on air because we're very honest about things. If you hate us, you like us, we're going to let you know. So you ready for the critique, Pete?
Sure. Let's go for it. I can't wait.
Please fix your volume. I'm not talking about the immediate reaction pods in the car, but the actual ones where you're in a studio. The volume on Spotify is extremely low, and then the commercials come on and blow my ears off.
I'm not in control of the commercials. I have no idea what the volumes are on those.
Yeah, it's not Hoff's fault, Mike. Jeez, man.
I'll try to put a little buffer in there to make it a little bit like, we'll fade up into or out of breaks and make it a little bit easier for you. But screw you. No, I'm joking. I do appreciate that. You're not the first person that's told me, and trust me, that's the one. Any producer will tell you, the only issue we ever have is when commercials come in so hot. It's just something that they always do. Commercials are always louder than the actual product, even on TV.
What Pete's trying to tell you is it ain't our fault. We're sorry about it, but don't blame us. Now, Mike did have some sports points to make. He wanted to list the bad of the New York Mets right now. Bad number 1, Francisco Alvarez, WTF. He is slumping, no doubt about that. Bad number 2, Edwin Diaz, double WTF. Why must it be 2 walks that gets this guy locked in? As much as Edwin Diaz causes heart palpitations, as long as he gets the job done, I'll live with the 2 walks to start every inning. Just get the job done. Don't give up a 3-run home run. Just get the job done like you did game 4 against the Phillies. Just get the job done like you did game 2 against the Dodgers. Number 3, defense in general. Even going back to the 2015 World Series, the high leverage defensive errors and miscues that seem to be the thing that can potentially dismantle a great game. Get the fundies down, Metsies. I think that when you play close games against good teams, no matter what anybody says, you're a good team right now if you're playing. You can't make the little mistake because the good teams take advantage of it. So when Mark Vientos had that bobble on the double play in the 6th inning, that could have killed us. Now, luckily, it wasn't really a miscue because they made the play because Vientos was able to field it. He threw to second. The throw to first was made, and they didn't F it up. Pete Alonso letting a ball go under his glove, little bit of an F up. You definitely want to see the defense be a little bit cleaner. Now, here's the good. Number 1, Francisco Lindor. Number 2, Mark Vientos' salami. Number 3, that sounds weird, Mark Vientos' grand salami. Number 3, Starling Marte staying clutch. Number 4, Pete Alonso's hyper drive scoring or stealing a base. Number 5, early scoring and quieting the annoying half-assed Hollywood fan base. Number 6, making Ohtani look pedestrian. How pedestrian was he? In game 1, he had 2 hits and drove in a couple of runs. Game 2, they kept him at bay, but they also walked him in his last 2 at-bats. Number 7, not letting Mookie do Mookie things. Yeah, did a good job against Betts. They struck him out 3 times over 4. And lastly, keeping Freddie Freeman off the bases. Yeah, especially in game 2. Ohtani 0 for 3 with 2 walks. Betts 0 for 4 with a walk. Freeman 0 for 5. So they did a great job of keeping the superstars from killing us. Mike Farley writes, Evan and Pete, as the Mets took a 6-run lead in the 2nd inning yesterday, I had 3 thoughts. Number 1, this is awesome. Such a punch in the gut to the Dodgers, and Mark Vientos gained all the respect after that intentional walk to Lindor. Number 2, it's only the 2nd inning, and the Dodgers are more than capable of coming back. Number 3, with a 6-run lead, the Mets have to win this freaking game, and you just know we're going to have to sweat it out until the end, assuming we still have the lead. Well, they proved me wrong. Phil Maton somehow got 3 outs with only 2 runs scoring on bases loaded, nobody out in the 6th. Playoff Ryan Stanek is a monster, and our beloved closer never does easy. No one is touching his gas yet. He can't throw strikes until he puts 2 batters on base, and he's literally trying to kill me and every one of you that is watching or listening to the Rico right now. But striking out 3 in a row, including Betts and Freeman swinging, was a thing of beauty. Yeah, it's never going to be easy. That's the one thing we've learned about this team. Even when they win and you win a game 2 and you jump out to an early lead like they did, they're never going to not give you stress. But as long as you win, isn't that all that matters? As long as you win. This one I need to address because I don't understand what the issue is. Howie from Flushing, very loyal listener to the Rico, said, Evan, I saw your X post on Shohei Ohtani and where's your bookie chant. Yes, I did make clear that I believe that Met fans should chant where's your bookie at Shohei Ohtani. I hope that takes off. I think that's a proper chant. I think it's a classy chant. We're not telling him to go F himself the way Yankee fans chanted Jose Altuve. I'm not endorsing chanting F Ohtani. I think that's stupid. I don't think there's any creativity. But Howie says, as far as chanting where's your bookie, I hope you're joking. Please be better than this. What's wrong with this? I mean, it's not like I'm saying something that's so inappropriate. Shohei Ohtani, I have no idea if Shohei Ohtani gambles. I have no idea, but that's part of the problem. There was a scandal involving one of the best players in baseball, and it just went away. It just disappeared. And I'll tell you, there are two reasons why I would want Met fans to chant, "Where's your bookie?" at Shohei Ohtani. Number one, maybe it gets to him. Not every player can take a chant that's directed at them. A lot of athletes can, some can't. So maybe you rattle Shohei Ohtani, who gets nothing but love wherever he goes. And number two, I want Joe Davis and Fox to have to say something. I want them to have to explain to their TV audience what baseball fans are chanting at him. I want them to have to re-explain the translator, the stolen money, the gambling, the fact that Ohtani's been fully exonerated. They could say that because he has been, right? He's fully exonerated. So I think it's good-natured, Howie. I don't think you should be offended by that. I'm not saying anything untoward. I think it's just something fun, and we want to have fun. Don't we want to have fun? We're at a baseball game. I want to have some fun. And I don't think, like, chanting derogatory things at him is fun. I think that's stupid. I don't think there's any creativity. So considering he's been linked to his translator, worked with him for a very long time, and his translator was gambling and stealing money from him, why not? I think it's fine. I don't think it crosses the line. I don't think I'm being mean. Am I being mean, Pete? Or don't you think that's a creative way to have some fun with the great Shohei Ohtani?
Well, I know what you're trying to do, so I was trying to think of some other stuff as well. It's definitely probably the most creative so far because no one else has done it, right?
Yeah.
And I think it will get under his skin, which is something that is very good. Let's be serious here. He hasn't really hit the cover off the ball yet, so we also don't want to light a fire, be like him, and get pissed off. But I think that would be something that would definitely hit a certain part of him in a good way.
I think that great players, and he is a great player. I have respect for Shohei Ohtani as a baseball player. It'd be foolish to say otherwise. I think that great players need to be razzed. And you want to do it, I think, in my opinion, in a creative way, not just cursing at them. You know, I've said this on the air, so I'll say it here. I think Knick fans chanting bleep Trae Young is lame. I think Yankee fans chanting bleep Jose Altuve is lame. And I'd be the first to tell you, if we do that at Citi Field, if we just start chanting F Ohtani, I think that's really stupid. I do. And I'd come on the Rico and say it. Like, I think we need to be better than that. And Met fans have in the past. If you think about, before I was around to do it, I remember hearing that Met fans were taunting Calvin Schiraldi. They would chant at him. And Boston fans chanted at Darryl Strawberry. That's where the Darryl chant came from. So I just want to have some fun. Let's have some fun.
I was about to say, it's like, what's one of your most legendary chants that the Mets fans used to give out to an opposing player? I know mine off the bat.
I mean, it's Larry. It's got to be Larry.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course. And think about it. That's his name. So it doesn't really hurt him that much. Yeah. But yet it felt like an insult. It felt like it was the fans were getting over on him. Yeah. It was so simple. It's perfect.
Yeah. Yeah, I think sometimes chanting somebody's name works. I remember, I'm trying to remember what we did, like what we said, but Met fans was so good trying to verbally attack Jeff Suppan during 2006. And for whatever reason, it's like he thrived off of it. He got better and better. We turned Jeff Suppan into a superhero because some guys react really well to it. It's a risk, but I think in the postseason, I don't think you need extra motivation. If you're great, you're going to be great. That's my feeling. Let's go to Patrice, I think is the name. Patrice writes, "Hey there, Rico Brogna. I wanted to send a couple of notes with hope Evan got intrigued enough to mention on the show. A shout out would give my kid a smile." Well, there you go. Here's your shout out, Patrice. How are you? Now Patrice is about to rip me. So he got the shout out, and now he's going to attack. "I love Evan's brain and enthusiasm. That's why I tune in. But dare I say we've crossed the cringe threshold when it comes to him discussing what he would do with the rotation versus Carlos Mendoza. Evan and a lot of people didn't like going with Senga game one, but that was the right call in the big picture of a 7-game series. If you flip Minaya and Senga for those games, we might be down 0-2. I think Mendoza, even if it's just a little bit, kept the possibility of a total flat mulligan game in the first game, which is what happened. Total wipeout. If that happens, you need your ace for game 2. Game 1 is never a must win. It's a wanna win. Great if we win. First of possibly 7 could never be must. Game 2 in many situations is a must win, primarily if you lose game 1. That's when you want your ace, not a bullpen game. I got to disagree with you about this. And the way I'll retort this is, if you're right, then why wouldn't every team not start their ace in game 1? Like, why wouldn't every team say game 2 is more important? I'd like to win game 1, so let me hold my best guy back for game 2. Like, the Yankees didn't hold Garrett Cole back just so that they had him in their back pocket. They couldn't pitch him in game 1 based on rest. If the Mets win this series promptly, don't you think you would rather have your best pitcher starting game 1? And what I also don't like, and I know why you say it, Patrice, a lot of people are saying it, is, well, look at the way it worked out. Jack Flaherty was amazing. If they started Manaea and he gives you 5 innings, 2 runs, they lose 2-0. Can we really have that kind of logic and think that everything stays the same? That's crazy to me. If Jack Flaherty isn't pitching with a big lead, remember he was up 3-0 before he could get comfortable, 6-0 after 4. If instead it's 0-0 in the 5th, you think Jack Flaherty's throwing the exact same game? Are we really making that assumption? So I disagree with that logic. But Patrice goes on. The same logic applies to not using Edwin Diaz against the Brewers. We lost the game we would have liked to have won. He's talking about game 2. That Evan and other fans got frothy about in the moment. But we had Edwin fresh for the actual must-win game, and that proved Mendoza to be wise and, dare I say, peak Joe Torre-like. If we use Edwin and still lose that game, we'd be even more effed. I think you are misremembering, though, what I said about that. So if I was going to use Diaz in that game 2 against Milwaukee, I wasn't using him for a 6-out save. I wasn't using him to not have him available the following day. I would have used him briefly to try to get through the 8th inning because the Brewers had their best hitters up. And also, that wasn't my biggest critique from game 2. My biggest critique was leaving Phil Maton in longer than he should have. I had no problem going to Maton in the 8th inning. I think you had 2 options. You had Maton in the 8th, or you had Edwin Diaz. Going with Maton didn't have a problem. It's once he gave up the lead, it didn't make sense to keep him in the game. My point isn't to harp on Evans so much as it is to defend Mendoza. He's been on point with his feel for the starting rotation, and you could generally always see his logic with his bullpen moves. That was much longer than intended, but here's some quick hits for you. All right. This Mark Vientos story is magical, and it occurred to me that the only person on the planet besides Dodger fans possibly rooting against Mark Vientos is Brett Beatty. Nothing against is probably too strong, but bittersweet reaction would seem appropriate. Rooting against is probably too strong, but bittersweet reaction would seem appropriate. Vientos is literally living Brett Beatty's dream. Brett Beatty had to dream coming up through the system, making plays at third base in the playoffs, hitting clutch home runs. We all dream this about him. And Mark Vientos, the quadruple A guy, couldn't cut it. Then all of a sudden, it's Vientos becoming the future all-star, and Brett Beatty is the guy we hope Stearns converts into a stud middle reliever during the offseason. Anyways, hopefully Brett is inspired to raise his trade value. Ronnie Mauricio as well. I don't know. I think that when guys are teammates with other guys for so long, even if they're competing for the same position, I don't necessarily know if they're rooting against each other, but it is kind of crazy to think about the arc, to think about what we thought back in March about the third base position and where it's turned. Mark Vientos has been, and I can't wait, when we do the off-season Ricos, we have like so many of them. This is going to be the easiest off-season Rico Brognas to do based on the magic of this season. But when you talk about like biggest surprise of 2024, there's so many options. I mean, so many ridiculous options. Mark Vientos blossoming into a superstar is probably towards the top of the list. But hopefully we don't start off-season Ricos for just a couple of weeks, because the New York Mets are 7 wins away from a world championship. 3 wins away from going to the World Series for the first time in 9 years. So we got game 3 coming up. I will give you a heads up that in order to do what I think is a better podcast, I'm not going to do a drive home after game 3. I'm going to literally drive home, come into the Rico studios. And so figure we'll do a Rico Brogna about 1 hour after game 3 ends. So if you're staying up late, win or lose, figure right around midnight, we'll give you a full edition of the Rico Brogna. I like doing the drive homes. They're fun every once in a while, but I think that it'll be a better discussion. And I won't be driving and dodging traffic. So we will give you a full Rico Brogna after game 3. Figure it'll be about an hour after the game ends. Same thing with game 4. So we'll do a couple of post games, but give us about an hour to leave the stadium, drive home. We'll go from there. Game 5 may be a little bit different. Game 5's up in the air. It's a 5 o'clock start. I don't even know if I'm going to game 5. I do have to do a radio show until 7 o'clock. So we shall see. But for game 3 and game 4, whether it's on YouTube, whether it's waiting for the podcast to be uploaded the following morning, we will absolutely give you reactions to game 3 of the NLCS and then game 4 of the NLCS.
And this is all because of the guy that emailed and complained about the volume of our podcast.
You know what it's honestly about? It's about the fact that I like doing the drive homes. They're very raw. And I would like, after a playoff game where there's so much to digest, to be able to sit down and have a discussion about it. It's still kind of an instant reaction because it's going to be literally when I drive home and get back to my home. So I just think overall it's a better podcast. But, whatever your opinion is, maybe you prefer the drive homes. That's fine. Let us know. We appreciate the interaction and appreciate your opinions. RicoB@gmail.com. The RicoB@gmail.com is the way to contact us.
Yeah, no, I do actually want to know. I'd like to know if people enjoyed you being at the stadium when they were when the Mets were celebrating for the NLDS. Listen, it's something that I think that you being there definitely adds to it. I know that, driving home, that instant gratification feels good too. I don't know if you're going to be worn down after a Mets win on game 3. Are you?
Am I going to be worn down?
Yeah.
I'm going to have a lot to freaking say. I'll tell you that. Win or lose, I'll have a lot to say. We'll figure it out. I mean, look, hopefully we're doing a Rico Brogna when they win the National League pennant. Hopefully we're doing Rico Brognas when they win a world championship. So we'll have to figure it out as it goes on.
Oh, one quick thing I do want to say. I know that you haven't finished watching the Yankee game yet, but all I know is the Yankees are probably going to get to the World Series. The National League is going to win the World Series, whoever that's going to be. I'm just telling you right now. I just want to get it out there.
So there's a problem with all this, okay? Because this is like the new talking point from us Met fans. The American League blows. The Guardians suck. It doesn't matter. It really doesn't. It's just about getting to the World Series. I would rather have the easiest road possible and get to the World Series than have to go through a murderer's row of teams and come up one game short. So, number one, it doesn't matter how good the competition is as long as you beat them. And number two, here's why I'm not saying you're wrong because I don't know what's going to happen in the World Series, but I'll give you a specific example. 2010, the San Francisco Giants with mirrors got to the World Series. They had no lineup. Their lineup was Cody Ross and Pray for Rain. And the Texas Rangers felt like this superpower. They just got past the Yankees in a 5-game series or 6-game series. I think they beat them in 6. Yeah. They were up 3-1. They closed it out in 6 games. And the Rangers against the Giants felt like a mismatch. I remember saying it on the air, boy, the Giants have no chance. How can they hit Cliff Lee? Nobody can hit Cliff Lee. The Giants are going to hit Cliff Lee. And they beat the crap out of Cliff Lee. And the Giants won the World Series. And they did it fairly easily. It is a best-of-7 series. It doesn't mean the best team's going to win. So you could sit here all day and crap on the Yankees or crap on the Guardians and crap on the American League. And by the way, it's all fair. I'm not saying they're flawless. But the idea that the Mets or the Dodgers would just smoke them in a World Series, that's not fair. You don't know that. That's not the way sports work. That's not the way the World Series works. The best team doesn't always win.
I'm not saying smoke. I'm just saying that the NL is going to win this year. And it's not actually discrediting the Yankees because I think the Yankees are actually a very good team. Mm-hmm. I just think between the Mets and the Dodgers, I feel like they're more battle tested. They've had to go through If you're going to get through this series, it's going to be because you've had to fight through adversity. I honestly look at the Yankees, and I just don't see that right now.
Well, what could hurt the Yankees, and it hurt us, so I know it from full experience, was having a very long layoff if you sweep a championship series and then you're waiting for a week for a World Series to start. We've seen a lot of examples of that over the years. The Colorado Rockies, the New York Mets in 2015. What's interesting, and hopefully this is the case, because, hopefully it's the case for us. If the Mets, or the Dodgers for that matter, won this LCS in 5, and let's say the Yankees won their series in 4 or 5, the World Series would move up. It would actually start earlier. So they would allow that if both teams make quick work of their opponents. If only one team is making quick work of their opponents, then the other team's got to wait. And that has proven to be something that hurts teams in the past. I definitely think it hurt the Mets back in 2015. People were bringing that up this series, saying, the Mets have to wait. It's nothing compared to the World Series. I think it was 9 days. That's ridiculous. Imagine not playing baseball for that long a period of time.
That was like the Rockies in 2008. They completely just wiped the floor with everyone in the NL and had to wait like 10 days to face the Red Sox.
It killed them. Now, I also think the Rockies were probably not that good in 2007, so I think they were inevitably going to get picked off. But yes, having all that time off absolutely hurt them. But we'll see. We'll see if that's a thing for either of us. Again, Rico, Brogna, probably about an hour after the conclusion of Game 3 of the National League Championship Series. Thank you very much for listening, downloading, subscribing to another edition, an LCS edition of Rico Brogna.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Rico Brogna podcast. It's amazing, isn't it? Make sure you download it now to keep it on you at all times.